And you don't find that around too much anymore.
Don Rickles made over 100 appearances on The Tonight Show. He looked fearless, insulting Johnny Carson night after night. But his daughter Mindy just revealed the shocking truth. Behind the scenes, her father was terrified of Carson. Before every show, he rehearsed his jokes in silence, worried about going too far. After Carson retired in 1992, something happened that broke Rickles' heart. Mindy says her father carried a secret hurt for 25 years. What Carson did to the man who made millions laugh will surprise you. Don Rickles came into the world on May 8, 1926, in a small apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens, where the air always felt thick with the hopes of two immigrant parents trying to build something from nothing. His father, Max, had come from Lithuania, and his mother, Etta, carried her Austrian roots with her like a quiet reminder of the past they had both escaped. Life was modest, crowded, and full of neighbors who treated each other like extended family. Don grew up watching his parents work hard through the Great Depression, and even though they had little, they pushed him to dream big. His mother especially kept nudging him to excel, but inside he felt a constant unease, a sense that he did not quite fit with the kids around him. Still, his parents encouraged him whenever he showed an interest in performing. That early mix of love, pressure, and tight living shaped the boy who wanted desperately to climb out of Queens and into something larger. When World War II pulled young men across the country into uniform, Don joined them. In 1944, he enlisted in the United States Navy and ended up as a seaman first class aboard the USS Cyrene. It was a submarine tender supporting motor torpedo boats in the Pacific. The heat was brutal. The nights were restless. The threat of attack never really went away. But Don found ways to keep spirits up. He cracked jokes for his shipmates and turned long waiting hours into small comedy shows. Those moments sharpened his wit without him even noticing. New Guinea, late days blending into each other. The Navy taught him discipline and grit and reminded him that humor could survive anywhere. Years later, he would say those lessons never left him and became the spine of the tough stage persona people came to love. When he came home in 1946, he tried to live the life his father hoped for. He sold life insurance for a short time, going door to door and trying to be convincing, but the work drained him. He hated every minute of it. He could not close sales, and each failed pitch chipped away at him. His mother saw right through his forced smile. She nudged him again, this time toward the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He enrolled, grateful and nervous. He later admitted that the insurance job was a disaster and that he felt empty during those months. But leaving it behind gave him the first taste of taking control of his life. At the Academy, he dove into dramatic acting. Jason Robards walked those halls. Anne Bancroft did too. Grace Kelly moved through the same rooms. Don tried to blend in, studied scripts, learned timing, worked on his voice, and hoped for big roles. But the more he auditioned, the more doors seemed to close. Casting directors kept repeating the same lines. Not the right look, not leading man material, not what we want right now. One comment during an audition cut him deeply. Someone said he was simply not a leading man, and it stuck with him for years. Each rejection carved a mark inside him, building a hunger for some kind of approval. Even then, he did not realize that all the timing and presence he was learning would later fuel the comedy style that made him famous. Those early wounds never quite healed, and they followed him into the spotlight. The need for acceptance grew stronger, especially when he stepped onto the stage of The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson controlled the doorway to national fame. A single laugh from Carson could lift a comedian into the big leagues. Don craved that nod. He once said Carson's laughter felt like the greatest validation he could receive. Their relationship was warm at times and cold at others, and the uncertainty kept Don on edge. He adored Carson, but he also felt stung whenever he believed Carson did not give him the recognition he longed for. That tension stayed with him throughout his rise. Before The Tonight Show, before the fame, Don struggled just to survive in show business. In the 1950s, he moved from New York to Los Angeles looking for acting work, but casting directors kept turning him away, and frustration pushed him into nightclubs. His early stand-up relied on written jokes, but those jokes fell flat. Then, something unexpected happened. When a heckler shouted at him one night, Don fired back with a quick insult. The audience exploded with laughter. That was the moment his life shifted. He leaned into it, letting insults become the act. By the late 1950s, he was known for his sharp tongue, fast comebacks, and fearless attack. He had found something raw and real that separated him from everyone else. Soon his style became a tightrope. He joked about everyone and everything. Jewish audiences, Italian audiences, Irish audiences, his own mother. He mocked people equally, and somehow that made the room feel united. It could have gone wrong at any moment. One wrong line could have turned the whole crowd against him. But Don instinctively knew how far to push, how to soften the sting with warmth behind the eyes. That balance made him a pioneer, paving the way for comedians who later embraced risky humor. People called him Mr. Warmth, and the nickname stayed because it captured the funny truth of him. On stage, he tore everyone apart, but off stage, he was gentle and loyal, especially to family. His daughter Mindy spoke often about his kindness and how protective he was. Audiences sensed the difference. They knew that behind the loud voice and wild put-downs, there was a man full of heart. That duality kept people coming back. His grind through lounges and casinos took him everywhere, especially Las Vegas. There he took a risk that could have ended everything. He started joking about Frank Sinatra, someone known for having a dangerous circle. One night, Don called Sinatra a heavyweight. Instead of being insulted, Sinatra roared with laughter. He became one of Don's biggest champions. With Sinatra's support, Don's career gained a level of protection and status that other comics envy. Still, Don never escaped the pressure of relying on powerful figures. Carson remained the most important one. Being welcomed on The Tonight Show meant stability. Being shut out meant trouble. Don knew this every time he walked onto that stage. He prepared as if each appearance could decide his future. The approval he wanted so badly from Carson made those moments feel heavy, but the reward was huge. Those appearances carried him through times when everything else felt uncertain. By the late 1950s, Don finally reached Hollywood. His first film break came in 1958 with Run, Silent, Run Deep. He was 32, though he looked older, which worked perfectly for a story set inside a submarine. He played Ruby, the wisecracking sailor who brought levity to scenes dominated by Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster. The movie was not a giant hit, but for Don, it was the door he needed after years of grinding in clubs. Audiences finally saw him on screen. Then came 1963, and something very different. Roger Corman cast him in X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes. It was a serious sci-fi horror film made on a tiny $300,000 budget and shot in 3 weeks. Don played Crane, a carnival barker who manipulated Ray Milland's character. It was dark and unsettling, and miles away from Don's comedic world. The film became a cult classic and even won the Silver Spaceship Award in Italy. People were surprised by how convincing Don was in a serious role. He proved he could step outside his insult comic identity and hold his own. In 1968, he released his live album, Hello, Dummy. The recording came from a performance at the Sahara Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. It ran about 35 minutes and captured him at full power. The album landed at number 54 on the Billboard 200. That was no small thing for a comedy record. It showed that his voice could travel beyond clubs and casinos. Years passed, and in 2025, the Library of Congress added Hello, Dummy to the National Recording Registry. It became a piece of preserved history, proof of how his humor shaped culture. That same year, ABC launched The Don Rickles Show. It lasted only 17 episodes, one season. Then it vanished and was replaced by Let's Make a Deal. Don mixed sketch comedy with musical numbers and quick insults. But somehow, the show never connected with viewers. Its cancellation shook him. It reminded him that television could give and take in a blink. He felt unstable again, unsure of what the future held. So he returned to the place that had always given him grounding, The Tonight Show. Under Carson's protection, he found steady exposure and financial comfort. Millions watched every time he went on. The banter between them felt electric. Those appearances became more than job opportunities. Don Rickles grew into the name Mr. Warmth because he kept taking bold steps that pushed him out of the nightclub world and into something bigger. It happened slowly at first, then all at once. In 1995, Martin Scorsese gave him a spot in Casino and handed him the part of Billy Sherbert, a quiet casino manager who had to survive in the middle of Las Vegas chaos. Rickles had only 10 lines, yet he somehow left people talking about him when the movie ended. The film earned more than $116 million, and even at 69 years old, He stole scenes with a dry spark that never faded. He even teased Quentin Tarantino during shooting. Tarantino had a cameo, and Rickles cracked jokes until Tarantino turned red and laughed like a kid who got caught doing something silly. And years before that, Rickles had shown another side in Kelly's Heroes in 1970. He played Crap Game, a tank driver who spoke in wisecracks during moments where war usually silences everything. That mix of humor and action helped the film turn into a cult favorite. Bit by bit, these roles reshaped Rickles' image. He was no longer just the nightclub insult comic. He started to feel like a Hollywood fixture, someone directors relied on when they needed a sharp but honest presence that could hold a scene without effort. Then, something else happened. Rickles stepped into the world of animation and found a whole new audience waiting for him. In 1995, he voiced Mr. Potato Head in Toy Story. It became the first fully computer-animated feature film, and it earned more than $373 million across the world. Suddenly, kids who had never seen him roast anyone on stage fell in love with him. He kept coming back for the sequels, even in his 80s. Sometimes recording lines just a few weeks before he died in 2017. His daughter Mindy wrote about this in a Library of Congress essay. She said her father felt deeply connected to the role. It mattered to him because it tied him to her and to their family story. When he was sick, when his energy faded, he still wanted to walk into that studio and record something for the character. After he passed away, Pixar used old recordings to keep his voice alive in Toy Story 4. It felt like a tribute. The character ended up holding not just Rickles' humor, but also his loyalty and his heart. Mindy said it filled him with purpose during his last years and gave him something he felt proud to leave behind. People always treated the title Mr. Warmth as a joke, yet it reflected something true about Rickles. His insult comedy took no prisoners. Still, everyone who met him off stage talked about how kind and generous he was. The National Comedy Center in New York gathered his work and made sure his legacy stayed safe for the next generation. At the many comedy roasts held over the years, his closest friends like Frank Sinatra and Bob Newhart gladly took their turns insulting him, even though he usually roasted them harder. Yet every roast ended with affection and respect, never bitterness. The double nature of Rickles' persona held everything together. He could be brutal on stage, then turn warm and gentle as soon as the lights went off. After he died, people from all corners of entertainment said almost the same thing. They said the name Mr. Warmth fit him more than anyone understood while he was alive. He carried that warmth into places many fans never heard about. Rickles supported Jewish charities for decades. He helped fund projects like the Barbara and Don Rickles Gymnasium at Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. Colleagues knew about his generosity, but fans were often surprised. They were used to seeing him throw verbal punches at strangers, not donate time and money to help people who needed him. Yet that was the real man. His philanthropy had nothing to do with publicity. It came from compassion he rarely showed on stage. This contrast made him more interesting. There was the sharp comic people loved to watch, and the gentleman who lifted communities quietly, never demanding attention. The most revealing part of Rickles' life sat inside his friendship with Johnny Carson. Rickles first appeared on The Tonight Show in 1965 and greeted Carson with the line, "Hello, dummy." It shocked the room and marked the start of something that lasted almost 30 years. He went on to make more than 100 appearances, one of the highest counts of any guest in Carson's era. Those visits helped turn Rickles into a household name. Other comics played safe when they sat next to Carson, but Rickles didn't. He thrived on unpredictability, and audiences loved not knowing what he would say next. He became the only comedian who could insult Carson in front of millions and get invited back every time. That number, more than 100 appearances, shows how much power Rickles had and how much Carson trusted him. Their on-screen moments felt wild and almost dangerous. Rickles wandered onto the set without warning. Sometimes he smashed things on Carson's desk, then joked about Carson's hairline or his marriages or his authority. In one unforgettable moment in 1983, Rickles looked at Carson and said that if he had Carson's hairline, he would wear a hat. Carson laughed along every time, even jumping into the chaos when it made the moment funnier. None of this was scripted. Rickles interrupted other guests. He changed the mood of entire segments just by walking onto the stage. These moments became part of talk show history. They helped shape how late-night comedy works today. Audiences believed Rickles feared no one. After all, they saw him mock Carson week after week. Yet behind the scenes, Rickles worried constantly about crossing a line. Mindy Rickles shared this in a 2023 interview. She said her father respected Carson more than he respected anyone in television. Before each Tonight Show appearance, he rehearsed his insults in his mind and checked to see how far he could push a joke without offending the host. He even admitted he felt nervous as hell before his first appearance. Off camera, he called Carson the boss and often checked in after shows to make sure everything was fine. The irony never faded. On air, he looked fearless, but in private, he knew Carson could end his access to millions of viewers with one decision. Carson was both a friend and a gatekeeper to Rickles. Carson opened the biggest door in Rickles' career, but he also controlled when that door stayed open. His approval meant more appearances. A single bad night could ruin everything. This became clear in 1992 when Carson retired. Rickles had believed Carson promised him a role in future projects. When that promise faded, Rickles felt betrayed. He carried that hurt for years. Their relationship seemed warm on camera, but off camera, it was built on television needs and unwritten rules. Carson had the power to erase Rickles from living rooms across America with one choice. Their story showed how friendship and authority mix in entertainment. They often exist together in ways that are complicated and hard to separate. Through all this, Mindy Rickles grew up watching her father balance his public persona and his private fears. She became an actress and a voice performer, and spent her childhood moving through Tonight Show tapings and red carpet moments. She saw the legend and the man at the same time. She wrote about both sides in her essay for the Library of Congress. She described a father who was loving, funny, and attentive, but who also carried a need for validation from powerful people. It shaped his emotional world at home. He could make crowds laugh until they cried, yet he still worried about approval from the few people whose opinions mattered to him more than fame ever did. Only two men could shake Rickles' confidence in a visible way: Johnny Carson and Frank Sinatra. Mindy remembered how her father handled almost anyone with ease. Yet when it came to Carson, he wanted to earn his laughter every single time. And when Sinatra walked into a room, Rickles' jokes danced on a thin line between admiration and risk. He once told Sinatra and his tough-looking entourage to make themselves at home and hit somebody. He held his breath, then relaxed when the room burst into laughter. These moments revealed how deeply Rickles valued acceptance from the handful of figures who ruled his world. His career might have made him a legend, but the need to be truly liked by the people he admired stayed with him always. Mindy Rickles grew up in a world where bright lights and loud laughter were normal, yet she also saw the quiet moments that shaped her father. She watched Don Rickles work rooms full of strangers while carrying worries that only his family noticed. She sat beside him at Tonight Show tapings long before she understood why those nights mattered so much. And as she got older, she began to see that her father's comedy was built on something far more fragile than people ever guessed. She shared in her essays how he could be loving and present at home while still chasing the approval of people who barely knew him. That search shaped him. It shaped their home, too. His warmth was real, but so was the insecurity hiding behind the quick punchlines, and Mindy felt both sides as she grew up. She always said that her father changed the moment Johnny Carson entered the picture. Don admired many people, but Carson stood on another level. His approval meant everything. Before each appearance, Don walked around the house in silence, running through jokes in his head. He worried about going too far or landing on a note that would make Carson shut down. When the cameras rolled, he looked fearless, but Mindy saw the truth. She saw him watch Carson's face more closely than the audience. She saw how he tried to measure each reaction, each smile, each flick of the eyes. And afterward, she saw him replay moments over and over, wondering if Carson had liked the set or if he had disappointed him without knowing it. That tension never fully went away. Even when Sinatra walked into the room and Don's sharpest jokes flew like sparks, Carson remained the one who could throw him off balance. Sinatra's approval mattered too, and Don liked to pretend he had no fear of anyone in that circle. But the truth came out in small moments. Mindy remembered how relieved he was after that night when Sinatra's entourage laughed at a line about hitting somebody. He laughed with them, but she saw the breath he released afterward. Under all the bravado, the man who made millions laugh still wanted certain people to accept him. That need ran deeper than fame. With time, Don convinced himself that all his years beside Carson would lead to something lasting. He believed that when Carson retired in 1992, he would find a place in that transition. Maybe not as a host, maybe not as a permanent part of the show, but at least as someone honored for 30 years of loyalty. He waited for the call, but NBC moved forward without looking back. Leno took the desk. New faces filled the room, and Don found himself watching it all from a distance. Friends later said he felt more hurt than angry. Hurt that the laughter he had helped build was suddenly moving on without him. Hurt that nobody reached out. And when the first months passed with no sign of Carson, that hurt settled even deeper. As the years rolled forward, that silence grew. Mindy described it as a kind of quiet ache. There had been a time when Don and Carson shared warm glances between jokes and little nods backstage that meant more than words. After the show ended, those gestures faded. They never argued. They never had a public falling out. They just drifted. Don tried to keep the connection alive with small comments and the occasional call, but the distance stayed. And Mindy said that her father felt that shift more strongly than anyone realized. He had given so much of himself to that show, yet when the curtain closed, it closed on him too. As Don entered his later years, he started to talk more honestly about that wound. Friends said that before he died in 2017, at the age of 90, he opened up about feeling abandoned by the system and by Carson himself. He still admired Carson. That never changed, but he carried disappointment like a secret weight. Mindy confirmed that even in private conversations, he never stopped respecting Carson's talent. Yet the missing farewell, the missing acknowledgement, the missing friendship after 1992 stayed with him. The lack of closure haunted him in quiet ways that audiences never saw. Mindy called this period the silent tension. It was the space between what the world believed and what her father felt. Documentaries talk about it now, showing how Rickles and Carson drifted without a final conversation, without even a simple thank you. Don tried to joke about it on stage, but Mindy knew those jokes came from a place of pain. Behind every laugh, there was something unresolved that he never learned how to name. In her interviews, Mindy explained that he never attacked Carson publicly. He could tease anyone on Earth, but he never tore down the man who meant so much to him. Instead, he held those feelings inside. He praised Carson in interviews. He called him a genius at family gatherings. He talked about how Carson was the only one who could keep him in line on live television. But Mindy heard the softness in his voice. She saw the sadness when he talked about the old days. She knew that her father's heart carried both admiration and loss, and as the years passed, Mindy realized that her father's entire relationship with Carson was built on real affection and a kind of trust that rarely happens between performers. Yet behind that trust lived a fragile man who feared losing the people he admired most. Her father had spent 60 years giving the world a reason to laugh, but when the lights went out, he still wondered whether he had been truly valued by the ones he trusted. That vulnerability was something only his family ever witnessed, and Mindy felt responsible for telling that story. When Don Rickles died on April 6, 2017, tributes poured in. Jimmy Kimmel broke down on air. Stars like Samuel L. Jackson and Marlon Wayans remembered how he could tear a room apart with a single line, still make everyone feel included. Fans filled his Hollywood star with flowers. People called him the last giant of classic showbiz comedy. They praised his sharpness, his timing, his fearlessness, but the world only saw the comedian. Mindy saw the man who walked off stage and wondered whether he had earned the laughter of one person in particular. After his death, she told his story again in a Library of Congress essay and a set of videos in 2023 that reached more than 1 million viewers. She shared letters, private memories, and conversations that showed how deeply her father cared about his friendships. She also reminded the world that Carson died on January 23, 2005, at the age of 79, long before either man could explain or resolve the silence that had grown between them. With Carson gone, Mindy's words became the final key to understanding a partnership built on comedy and anchored in quiet emotion. She wanted people to know that Don Rickles was more than the king of insults. He was a man shaped by loyalty, shaped by fear of letting people down, shaped by the relationships he treasured even when they hurt him. She wanted the world to feel the affection he carried and the fragility he hid, because under every sharp joke and wild insult, there lived a performer who cared too much, loved too deeply, and feared being forgotten by the ones who meant the most to him.